Chapter 21, A Strange Proposal. The desperate search for Lydia had gone on for several weeks without significant leads, and summer was soon ending. The spread of viruses had slowed their progress, but they had ignored the mandates due to their circumstances. Eventually, the rest of the community became willing to take their chances and go about their everyday lives. Despite Israel's immediate neighbors threatening war daily, Daniel, Yosef, and John regrouped and formed a small army to try to find Lydia. Their work in archaeology allowed them to know several hiding spots within the city, and they began mapping out possible locations where Lydia might have been taken. Their first step was returning to where Lydia was last seen, the Temple Mount. So far, they had found no trace of her. On the other hand, they could not avoid that the evidence pointed more and more to the man with the twisted face and his connection with PRISM. Dr. Crowning and several political leaders controlled the area, so it would be difficult to gain access. However, there was a possibility. Due to the connection of Rachel's parents there, Rachel and Joel volunteered to go back.
I don't like it. It's far too dangerous,
Daniel said, shaking his head.
How else will we get in?
Asked Joel.
The place is guarded like a fortress. I will just take my camera to do another report like usual.
I don't think they can do much to us with my parents being their top physicists either,
Rachel suggested.
We can at least try to find some clues.
Despite Daniel's fears over them going back into enemy territory, he knew it might be his only way to save Lydia.
All right, but you will have to go about it very carefully. Watch what you say in front of people and be wary of your actions,
he told them. After they had made a solid plan to divide and conquer the search in each location, the family set out once again to find her. When they contacted Rachel's parents, they learned that PRISM had just opened in a new location due to the recent explosions in the French facility. Conveniently, it was on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Mr. and Mrs. Kozlov immediately sent a company car to pick them up, and Rachel and Joel were on their way to meet them. The driver looked ahead silently as Joel and Rachel sat nervously in the back.
What will Rachel's parents and their colleagues think once we begin asking bizarre questions to find my mom, who is presumed dead?
Thought Joel as he fidgeted with his camera in the back seat. Judas had sent someone to retrieve the station's equipment, but Joel had transferred all his evidence onto his own camera. Rachel looked at him somberly and gave a weak smile in an attempt to comfort him. Suddenly, the driver sharply turned down a secluded, dusty road. The ride was so bumpy that Joel held onto his camera, himself, and Rachel as their heads smacked the car's roof. The driver continued looking blankly ahead as though the jostling was routine. They headed down a rugged slope. Ancient, cavernous cliffs towered over the road with a foreboding presence. Eventually, the road smoothed a little after several twists and turns once they got past the rocky pathway.
This must be it,
said Joel as soon as the newly erected PRISM complex came into view. It looked identical to the one in France. It was so similar that it was as if someone had transplanted the entire facility into its new location. The underground loop surrounded the mirrored skyscrapers jutting out against the familiar mountainous scenery. PRISM logos, again, littered the walls, and the same statue of Shiva seemed to glare down at the couple as they made their way to the entrance. Rachel shivered. Joel put his arm around her as they mounted the stone staircase. Inside this PRISM facility just outside of Jerusalem, scientists in white lab coats and hard hats were again all abuzz, attempting to finish all computer hookups and synchronizations to the latest particle collider in their new state-of-the-art facility. The same assistant greeted Joel and Rachel with hard hats as they descended lower into the maze of hallways. The particle accelerator was well on its way to begin its new experiments. Joel had just caught a glimpse of the machine, which seemed even bigger than the last one, with new crystals and other precious stones centered at a focal point. A familiar British voice spoke up behind him.
Joel, Rachel, it's always a pleasure.
Pandora,
said Joel.
It looks like you have quite a new toy here.
Yes, something we've been tinkering with, you might say.
Pandora said with a smile.
So good to see you again,
said Rachel.
Yes, well, let's hope your visit will be more enjoyable this time, Your parents are at a meeting with Dr. Crowning, but let's go into my office for now so I can get you settled with some refreshments.
That sounds nice,
said Rachel as they went down to the same secluded area. She attempted to see if there was the same mirror in the room on the way to Pandora's office, but someone had shut the door.
This place seems exactly the same as the building in France,
said Joel.
Yes, it is precisely the same layout.
he replied.
It is important that all of the design be the same. The only difference is the bigger toy. We will get much more precise data this time.
Pandora smiled.
Here we are.
Pandora welcomed Rachel and Joel into his secluded office with the same faint smell of sulfur and Ben, the dog. He jumped right up onto Joel's lap. When Pandora tried to correct Ben, Joel said it was fine, and Ben snuggled comfortably between him and Rachel.
We need to show you something, Dr. Pandora.
Joel pulled out his camera and showed Pandora the footage from when they were in the tunnels under the PRISM facilities in France. As it got to the part with the screams, Ben ran off and hid under the table, and Pandora became noticeably disturbed.
This is the part I want you to see.
Joel paused the video on the man with the twisted face.
Do you see this face? Have you seen it before?
Pandora sat back in his chair, and it was clear that he was quite uneasy. He began rubbing the scar above his temple in deep thought.
You have seen him before, haven't you?
Asked Joel.
Yes, I have seen him before. He's broken into our facilities more than once.
Who is he?
Asked Rachel.
I'm not sure.
Replied Pandora.
Check this out.
Joel showed him footage of the same man at the Wailing Wall.
See that lady struggling behind him? That's my mother.
Your mother, but I thought...
That she was dead? Yeah, so did we. He has been following our family around for years, and now he has my mother. We are trying to find her now.
And we are here to help,
said another man's voice. It was Mr. Kozlov, Rachel's dad. He and Mrs. Kozlov walked inside Pandora's office.
Dad, Mom,
said Rachel, hugging them. Dr. Crowning was also standing just outside the door.
So nice to see you two again. Dr. Pandora, may I speak with you for a moment?
Of course,
said Pandora.
Please make yourselves comfortable. There are some refreshments if you like,
he said, pointing to his mini fridge. He closed the door as he exited, leaving Joel and Rachel with her parents.
Joel, I know that you are anxious to find your mother, which is why we have taken the liberty of hiring a private investigator,
said Mr. Kozlov.
We want you both to be safe, as well as the rest of your family.
That is very generous of you, sir.
It's not a problem. Happy to do it, son. We have also hired a couple of officers to keep you two safe until this whole thing blows over. The last thing we need is for another one of you to disappear.
Mr. Kozlov put his hands on Joel and Rachel's shoulders and showed genuine concern. Rachel's mother looked worried.
Rachel, dear, I wish you would consider staying here with us until this is all over.
Rachel and Joel both looked at one another.
Just for a short while. I'm sure that this will all be over very soon.
Mom, I understand your concern, but...
There will be no buts about it now. You will stay with us until this is all over.
Her mom was suddenly short and to the point. Rachel looked at her mother with tears in her eyes.
If you will excuse me, I think I'll go and freshen up for a moment.
Rachel gave her mother a slight curtsy before leaving the room. As her mother followed her down the twisted hall, Rachel spun around to face her outside the room where the mirror had been in the other facility.
Why do you want me to stay with you now? You have never cared about me. You're just mad that I'm finally happy with Joel.
That's not true, Rachel.
Mrs. Kozlov began to grow defensive.
We just want you to be safe.
You didn't care to leave me alone back in Indiana for all those months.
We had to leave you there to finish school. Besides, I did not think you wanted to leave poor Joel behind. I know we didn't tell you this, but we did have an officer monitoring you to keep you safe until you could come here.
I figured as much,
said Rachel with a smirk.
No, I never would have left Joel, but you could have been around more. What is it with you and your secrets? What about this room here?
Rachel pointed to the door. Her mother looked confused.
What about it?
I've seen this room in the other place, identical to this one. It had a mirror in it. Do you know anything about that?
Rachel, I don't know what you are talking about.
Mrs. Kozlov was getting agitated.
Besides, that was an entirely different building.
Uh-huh. And what about this picture?
She held up the picture Davy had given her before. The one with the UFOs hovering over Ashani, standing in the PRISM entrance. Rachel was angry, but then she regretted springing this on her mom as soon as she showed it.
We've seen these pictures before, Rachel. You know the stories that the fake news puts out about this place. It's called photo editing, and they are making a fortune from their deep fakes. We thought you and Joel could work together on a valid story about PRISM to help your career. This is just ridiculous.
Rachel realized the conversation had crossed the line and would get her nowhere. She was not going to share the information that the news station no longer employed them, or they might not let them have full access to the place.
I'm sorry, Mom. I am just upset about being separated from Joel. We've both been through a lot, and it's too much to take in now.
It's all right, dear. I know that you are upset. Let's clean you up and go back to join the others.
She and Rachel made their way to the ladies' room, and Rachel glanced back suspiciously at the closed mirror room door. Back in Pandora's office, Joel fidgeted after discussing the plans for the private investigator with Rachel's dad.
The man we've hired is very good, and no need to worry about the cost. We have it all taken care of.
Mr. Kozlov reassured him.
My family and I are very grateful for your help, Mr. Kozlov.
Call me Ivan, son.
Joel realized that this was a rare opportunity to ask him about something else on his mind. At this point, it might serve another purpose, luring out the man with the twisted face and finding his mother.
Ivan, I've wanted to speak with you about Rachel. I've wanted to ask you.
Joel hesitated nervously. He realized his palms were sweating and his throat was dry.
Yes?
I know a lot is going on right now, but would you give me permission to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage?
Joel finally blurted out what he had waited for the past year to say. Ivan chuckled and patted him on the back.
Honestly, I wondered when you would muster up the courage to ask.
Joel sighed in relief, as if he had held it in for an eternity. Both were chuckling heartily by the time Rachel and her mom returned to the room. They straightened slightly as Rachel finished drying her eyes.
There, you see, everything will be just fine,
said Mrs. Kozlov. Rachel gave Joel a confused look as he and her dad stifled their chuckles.
Rachel will be staying with us for the time being. However, we have help on the way for you and your family, Joel. Our thoughts go out to you.
She extended her hand toward Joel.
Thank you both very much.
He winced at the thought of having to leave Rachel and glanced quickly toward Ivan.
Before I go, is it okay if I take Rachel out to get a bite to eat? I understand there's a nice restaurant outside your facility.
Ivan spoke up quickly.
As long as you have an officer escorting you, I don't see a problem with that.
Mrs. Kozlov had wanted to object, but Rachel's dad kept her at bay.
Don't they remind you of us in our younger years, Ishani?
Thanks, Dad,
said Rachel. Joel placed his arm around her and waved goodbye as they quickly went back outside.
This is just what she always wanted.
Rachel walked with intensity.
Any excuse to have me monitored 24/7. Joel, I really don't want to stay here.
They are just worried about you and are trying to help. They have even more security than Uncle Yosef's mansion. It will be okay.
They just used their escort to monitor me for the past several months. I don't see why that can't continue as long as I can be with you.
She held Joel tightly for a moment. Joel felt at a loss for what to do. Ivan was helping them to find his mother, but Mrs. Kozlov was bent on separating him from Rachel. It was proper for them to be apart before their marriage, but leaving her there felt wrong. Although he tried to reassure her, he could not quite reassure himself. As soon as they left the building, the same driver that brought them there was waiting on the steps. Apparently, he was the hired officer as well. Something seemed familiar about him, but his countenance was too standoffish to make conversation. Joel and Rachel sat silently during the short drive to the nearby restaurant outside of PRISM. As they got near the restaurant's entrance, a local vendor was selling t-shirts. Joel stopped by to purchase one for Rachel, attempting to lighten her mood. Their officer waited in the car, watching closely as Joel and Rachel approached the shop. The vendor was an older man, obviously Jewish, with his long beard and kippah. He tried to speak to them in Hebrew but switched to English when he realized that Rachel could not completely understand.
How are you doing today, young man? Would you like to buy a souvenir for the young lady?
He raised his gray eyebrows, holding out several items for Rachel to see.
Yes, sir,
said Joel as Rachel held up different shirts to herself, each with various Jerusalem relics. The old man looked suspiciously at the officer in the car. Then he looked back at Joel.
Have you been to the PRISM facilities?
Joel nodded yes.
Funny thing, none of it was there until a week ago.
Rachel's eyes darted toward the old man.
What do you mean?
She asked.
It's like it appeared out of nowhere. We heard we were getting some European scientists to help our own physicists set up a nuclear research facility here, but no one expected things to come together this quickly. Many strange things have happened since it showed up. Its construction was finished before the third temple was even halfway completed.
What kinds of strange things?
asked Joel. Suddenly the old man began to grow uncomfortable.
Forgive me, I thought you might be able to explain, since you were allowed access.
We have some questions as well,
said Joel, sensing that the conversation might end if he did not interject.
What do you want to ask?
His face reassured the old man, and he began to talk again.
Well, you see, we've had a lot of earthquakes lately and...
He glanced toward their officer again.
Yes, we have noticed,
said Joel.
That is why we had to leave the United States.
This sounds strange, but people have seen things floating in the sky, more things than usual. Whole cities, have you seen it?
We have seen this as well,
said Rachel.
These are strange times to be living in.
That is a sure thing, young lady. Time is moving swiftly and darker times than this are coming. Some people around here believe that there is something sinister behind it all. Did you see the circular gate where a figure of the Hindu god Shiva stands?
Rachel and Joel nodded.
That is an idol, an abomination to our holy city.
His aged finger pointed at it with authority.
This idol represents Shiva as both a creator and destroyer of the world. God Almighty will judge whoever placed that abomination here. Moreover, the PRISM facility in France is located near a place called Saint-Genis-Pouilly. The Latin term for this is Apolliacum, believed to be where a temple stood for Apollo in ancient Roman times. Some say it was a gateway to the underworld. Many unholy sacrifices of humans have been performed there.
I've heard about that. It refers to Abaddon or Apollyon from Revelation 9, the angel of the bottomless pit,
said Joel. The old man nodded.
This new facility in Jerusalem has been placed near another unfortunate place within our own borders. Gehinnom, another possible gateway to hell where many ancient human sacrifices have occurred.
He pointed northward.
Ironically, they have also been gathering the Third Temple's foundation stones. Have you seen those trucks coming into Jerusalem? I used to give tours to Christian groups through here.
Yes, I have seen them. Does this temple have to do with the new announcement from the Prime Minister for us all to gather in the streets on Yom Kippur for a special announcement?
asked Joel. The old man got a twinkle in his eye.
You can count on it.
Sir, you might have known my grandfather. He also started out giving tours here when he was young. His name was Saul Cohen.
Saul Cohen?
The old man looked at Joel thoughtfully.
Yes, I knew Saul well. We did some work together. Very stout fellow. Strong personality, too. He became famous with his father around here for their archaeological finds. In fact, our tours were quite pleasant until people started wanting to visit Gehinnom too often.
Gehinnom, otherwise known as Hell,
said Joel.
I remember seeing something about this place. Isn't this where Israel fell into idolatry, burning their children as sacrifices to Moloch?
Yes, a horrible travesty. Instead of wiping out their enemies, they adopted some pagan practices, resulting in their downfall. I fear that it has been happening again. This is right next to the lowest place on Earth. We have seen untold sights here. PRISM held a pagan ceremony when they opened this new facility, and they had a willing sacrifice, a young woman. Since then, there has been no peace here.
Human sacrifices?
asked Rachel.
Listen, sir, I know some of those people, and they would never...
Rachel began to get defensive, putting back the t-shirts. Although she was angry with her mom, she did not like it when other people targeted either of her parents with these conspiracy theories. Her dad was so hard-working, and he did not deserve this.
Rachel,
started Joel, trying to calm her down. The old man could see that he had said too much. He looked nervously at the officer, who was now emerging from the car.
Might I suggest touring the Pool of Siloam? It is a recent discovery here in the city of David. It is the ancient site where Jesus healed a blind man. The ancient Israelites would wash there after being near this dark place and begin the journey upward to the Temple Mount, following the light. If things get dark for you, remember Psalm 23.
Thank you. We will be sure to remember that,
said Joel. He gently grabbed Rachel's hand and she followed. They left the old man as their officer approached. He smiled darkly as he held the car door open for them, and they headed toward the restaurant. They parked, went inside, and the officer waited near the entrance. The restaurant was an amazing contrast to the paleness of the PRISM facilities. It was part of an enormous complex itself with several accommodations surrounding its main hotel. Streams of lights connected the buildings together like a festive summer village. Inside the restaurant, the walls were full of rich colors, the lights were dimmed for the perfect mood, and the smells of freshly baked bread and grilled meats filled the air. Rachel pulled out her compact and checked to make sure her makeup looked fresh. She and Joel had reached the legal age in Israel, so Joel ordered Rachel the most expensive glass of wine on the menu. Ironically, it was from their own family winery.
This is so nice. Thank you, Joel.
Rachel's mood was finally uplifted. It was as if they were in a different world than a few moments ago. Instead of scientists running back and forth, cooks sang while busying themselves about the kitchen. The food tasted so fresh, and the music energized the whole place. Several customers began to break out into a song as well. Even the officer in the background seemed to lighten his mood. The familiar sense of butterflies fluttered in Joel's stomach. He knew he would not get a better opportunity, so he scooted his chair next to Rachel, holding her close. A rush of warmth enveloped them both.
Butterflies?
Rachel asked cheerfully. Joel grinned and nodded.
Me too.
He gently cupped her chin, laying an unexpected kiss on Rachel's soft lips. This was the sweet moment he had waited for. Then, to her surprise, he dropped to his knees and said,
Rachel, you are the love of my life. I know things are crazy right now, but I cannot imagine ever being without you. We have been through so much together. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?
The whole place seemed to stand still. The music drifted into silence, and everyone focused on Rachel and Joel, waiting to hear her answer.
Of course I'll marry you. I love you too.
She immediately wrapped her arms around his neck and embraced him with a passionate kiss, no longer worrying about smudges of lipstick. His lips tasted of wine mixed with honey. The crowd cheered as they both embraced each other in the happiest moment of their lives. Joel pulled the ring off his necklace. The sapphire, amethysts, and diamonds danced in the light. As he slipped it onto Rachel's finger, the stones began to glow brightly. Everyone joined in celebrating with plenty of wine to go around the other customers, including the officer outside. That same evening, an older, sharply dressed gentleman, with a thick Bible tucked underneath his arm, made his way to the back entrance. It would be a night that Joel and Rachel would never forget.